Imagine being forced onto a 145-kilometer mountainous march on foot. Oh, and you're 9 months pregnant.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Right, and you're not doing this because of like a family emergency or a job relocation. You are doing this because an emperor, thousands of miles away, wants to update his tax ledger.
Exactly. You are just a number to them.
You are nothing more than a statistic in his vast, crushing machine. Welcome in, everyone. Before we step fully into today's deep dive, I want to take just a moment to offer a genuine, divine blessing for your day and for the entire week ahead.
Absolutely.
May you find peace, clarity, and purpose in whatever you are navigating right now. We are so glad you are here with us.
It is a real privilege to share this time with you.
Today, we are exploring some incredibly layered source material. We're looking at the detailed historical and theological context compiled in the Holman and NAA study Bibles.
Yeah, specifically focusing on the second chapter of the Gospel of Luke.
Right. Our mission here is to peel back the layers of the nativity and the early life of Jesus. Because if you're used to picturing the pristine, quiet, wooden nativity scenes you see on holiday cards,
Well,
really,
you're going to be surprised.
yeah, the reality of first-century Judea is going to give you whiplash.
When you strip away centuries of, comfortable tradition, you are left with a narrative that is intensely grounded in the harsh realities of the ancient world.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, it is a story driven by immense political bureaucracy, systemic poverty, and just stunning subversive contrasts.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just some quaint holiday tale happening in a vacuum.
Right.
Luke sets up a massive, jarring collision right out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's a clash between the ultimate earthly power of the time and the most profound divine humility you could imagine.
Yeah, and to understand how Mary and Joseph end up in that famous manger, we have to look at the global politics first, the stuff that forced them onto that grueling ancient highway. So Luke anchors the narrative historically with a massive administrative event. It's a census decree from Caesar Augustus. And Augustus wasn't actually a given name.
Oh, really?
No, it was a title approved by the Roman Senate, meaning exalted. So you have the exalted ruler of the known world sitting comfortably in Rome.
Right, far away from the dirt and the dust.
Yeah, and he issues a decree that disrupts the lives of millions of ordinary people across the Mediterranean. And, the mechanism of Roman census was just brutally pragmatic.
Because it wasn't about public services, right?
Exactly. It was conducted for two very specific reasons: to maximize taxation and to register young men for compulsory military service.
Wow. And the sources dive into some heavy academic nuance regarding the timing here, too. They mentioned it was orchestrated while Quirinius was governor of Syria.
Yeah, there is actually an ongoing scholarly debate about the exact dating of this.
Okay, how so?
Well, the historical record points to a heavily documented, highly disruptive census around 6 AD under Quirinius, but Jesus' birth is generally dated earlier, around 6 to 4 BC. I see. So scholars suggest the Greek text could actually be translated to indicate a census that took place before Quirinius was governor, or perhaps he held an earlier administrative role.
That makes sense.
But honestly, the bureaucratic timeline, while it is fascinating to historians, is almost secondary to the immediate severe impact this policy had on the ground.
Yeah, because of this decree, Joseph and Mary are forced to travel from Nazareth in the region of Galilee all the way down to Bethlehem in Judea.
Right. And the mechanism here is ancestral lineage.
Because Bethlehem was the city of David.
Exactly. And Joseph was of the house of King David, so they had to go to his ancestral hometown to register.
But I really struggle with the logistics of this. I mean, the journey was roughly 145 kilometers, ending at an altitude of over 800 meters.
It's a serious hike.
That is like walking from New York to Philadelphia over arid, mountainous terrain, taking at least 3 or 4 grueling days.
Right. And Mary is heavily pregnant.
Yes. If they were already living and settled in Nazareth, wasn't there any kind of medical or legal exemption for a woman who was literally days away from giving birth? Forced travel under those conditions seems absurdly cruel, even for an empire.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you really have to understand the absolute indifference of the Roman machine.
They just didn't care.
Not at all. The empire did not care about the comfort, the safety, or the medical status of its provincial subjects. To Rome, you were literally just a number on a ledger.
Wow. So no doctor's notes?
Nope. There were no hardship exemptions. If the decree said return to your ancestral home, you return or you face the wrath of the local garrison.
That is intense.
But, the historical context reveals a profound theological argument being made by the author here. God is using the heavy-handed pagan bureaucracy of an emperor to maneuver this couple into the exact right geographic location.
To fulfill the prophecy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It fulfills the ancient prophecy from Micah that the Messiah would be born specifically in Bethlehem. Rome thinks it's just counting its money and securing its borders.
But the text argues Rome is unwittingly facilitating divine history.
Yeah, precisely.
That is a wild juxtaposition. The emperor thinks he is flexing his absolute power, but he is actually just moving the chess pieces for a completely different kingdom.
That's a great way to put it.
So exhausted from this forced march up into the mountains, this young couple finally arrives in Bethlehem. But the reality of their accommodation is shockingly bleak.
Yeah, it really is.
If Rome's indifference forced them on the road, the local economy forced them into isolation.
Right, because the Greek word often translated as in English is actually better understood as a guest room.
Oh, so it's not like a roadside motel.
No, it wasn't a commercial hotel with a flashing no vacancy sign. It could have been the crowded upper room of a relative's house or a packed caravanserai.
What's a caravanserai?
It functioned as a public walled shelter where travelers and their animals just camped out together. Either way, the town was overflowing with diaspora Jews returning for the census.
So there was just zero space for a woman in labor.
None at all.
So they are pushed into the margins. The traditional site of the birth, which has been recognized as early as the 2nd century, was a cave or a grotto.
Yeah, a place locals used to shelter their animals from the elements.
And this is where we get the details we gloss over every December. Mary wraps the baby in swaddling clothes. That wasn't just to make the baby cozy, was it?
No, not at all. It was the standard ancient practice of wrapping an infant tightly in strips of cloth.
Like really tight.
Yeah, to protect their limbs and keep them straight in a harsh environment. It was very utilitarian. And then she places him in a manger.
Which is literally an animal feeding trough.
Yes.
It's the ancient equivalent of turning a makeshift cardboard box into a crib because the inn had absolutely no space.
The visual reality is staggering. A damp cave, a feeding trough, and a baby bound in restrictive strips of cloth.
It's so far from the peaceful, glowing images we usually see.
But here's where the narrative bridges the gap between this obscure, private desperation and a massive cosmic announcement. The scene shifts from the silent cave to the active, rugged hillsides outside the village.
Where the shepherds are guarding their flocks at night.
Right. And when you dig into the agricultural and economic realities of first-century Judea, these weren't just any sheep.
Okay, tell me more about that.
What's fascinating here is the specific geography of their assignment. Bethlehem is incredibly close to Jerusalem, like just a short walk away.
Oh, I see.
So the flocks kept in these specific fields year-round were intrinsically tied to the local economy of the capital. They were very likely destined for sacrificial use in the Great Temple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these shepherds were raising the very animals that the entire Jewish religious system relied upon to atone for the sins of the people under the Old Covenant.
That is a massive realization. The angels don't appear to the high priests in the city who perform the sacrifices.
Nope.
They appear out in the dirt to the blue-collar laborers raising the sacrificial lambs to announce that the ultimate final sacrifice has just been born.
It's incredible poetry, and the way they announce it is equally loaded.
Yeah.
A multitude of the heavenly hosts lights up the sky, praising God and announcing peace on earth to men of goodwill.
Right, the classic Christmas verse.
But at this exact time in history, the Roman Empire was intensely proud of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It was the central propaganda of Augustus's reign. But how did Augustus enforce that peace?
I'm guessing not nicely?
Through the edge of a broadsword, through brutal taxation, and by crucifying anyone who dared to rebel.
Wow, okay.
The angelic announcement is a direct, subversive counter-narrative to the Pax Romana. True, universal peace wasn't going to come from the blood-soaked hand of Rome. It was launching from a feeding trough in a livestock cave.
It completely reframes the entire event. It's not just a comforting spiritual poem. I mean, it is a cosmic political statement. The true king has arrived, and he is subverting every expectation of how power works.
Which brings us to the next phase of the story, where that theme of inversion gets even more intense.
Following the strict requirements of Jewish law, the narrative moves away from the rural margins of Bethlehem. We head straight into the epicenter of religious power.
Right, the monumental, awe-inspiring architecture of Herod's temple in Jerusalem.
So what's the timeline here?
The timeline is governed strictly by the Torah. 8 days after the birth, the child is circumcised and officially given the name Jesus, which means Yahweh saves.
Yeah.
Then they observe the mandatory days of purification. According to the law of Moses, a mother was ceremonially unclean for a period after childbirth.
Right.
For a male child, that meant waiting an additional 33 days, making it 40 days total. At that point, they make the short journey up to the temple complex to present the child to the Lord.
But I struggle with this part of the text, too.
Why is that?
Well, if Luke is trying to convince an ancient status-obsessed audience that this child is the ultimate king, why highlight their sacrifice?
What do you mean?
Wait, if they're presenting the King of Kings to God, shouldn't they be offering a pristine, expensive lamb? The text specifically notes they brought a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons.
Yeah, it does say that.
In the ancient world, deities demanded massive, expensive, status-defining sacrifices. Highlighting that the family of the Messiah brought birds seems like terrible PR for divine king.
It would be terrible PR unless the author is intentionally highlighting their absolute lack of earthly status.
Okay, explain that.
Let's look at the legal mechanism in the book of Leviticus. The law of Moses actually required a year-old lamb for this purification ritual.
Right.
However, there was a specific written concession for the absolute poorest in society. If you were completely destitute and simply could not afford a sheep, you were permitted to bring 2 birds instead.
Oh, wow.
By recording this specific transaction, Luke is cementing the reality of their extreme poverty. The earthly family of the ultimate sacrificial lamb couldn't even afford to buy a lamb of their own.
That is deeply humbling. Imagine the sensory overload of this moment. They walk into this massive, opulent complex built by Herod the Great.
Yeah, a ruthless ruler obsessed with wealth, gold, and architectural dominance.
And they bring the meager offering of the poorest of the poor. They would have been standing in the court of women.
Yeah, they would
Yes.
guess.
And let's clarify what that space was. They weren't in some quiet, reverent chapel. The Court of Women was a sprawling 71-square-meter public plaza restricted by massive bronze barriers like the Nicanor Gate.
Exactly. It was the grand central station of the ancient Jewish world.
A noisy, chaotic environment where commerce, politics, religious ritual, and thousands of worshipers collided.
And it is in the middle of that chaotic public square that they have 2 defining encounters.
Right, Simeon and Anna.
First, they are approached by Simeon. The historical context describes him as a righteous man waiting his entire life for the consolation of Israel.
He had a promise from the Holy Spirit, right?
Yes, the Spirit had assured him he wouldn't die until he saw the Messiah. When he spots this poor family in the crowd, he takes the child and prays what we now call the Nunc Dimittis.
And what does that mean for them?
He praises God that his eyes have seen salvation, declaring this child will be a light for the Gentiles and glory for Israel.
But the celebration pivots instantly into a dark warning.
It really does. Simeon turns to Mary and delivers a heavy, sobering prophecy. He states that this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel.
Yeah.
He will be a sign that is spoken against, revealing the hidden thoughts of many hearts. And then he tells Mary, point blank, that a sword will pierce her own soul too.
Man, that's heavy.
It is a direct foreshadowing of the profound, agonizing grief Mary would experience decades later, watching her son be rejected, tortured, and crucified. The shadow of the cross falls right across this joyful dedication ceremony.
Right after Simeon, the narrative introduces Anna. She is a prophetess, and the details of her endurance are staggering.
Yeah, she is fascinating.
Depending on how you translate the Greek, she is either 84 years old or she had been a widow for 84 years, which would make her well over 100.
Either way, an incredibly long life of devotion.
She operates entirely in the margins. She never leaves the temple complex, spending her life worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day.
And the moment she sees the child, she immediately begins giving thanks and speaking about him to anyone who is looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem.
So what does this all mean? Look at the mechanism of revelation here. You have this towering, intimidating temple structure run by elite high priests, wealthy Sadducees, and powerful religious authorities.
Yeah.
Yet the ultimate savior of humanity is carried right past all of them. He is recognized not by the men running the complex, but by 2 elderly, infinitely patient individuals hanging out in the public courts.
Exactly. God's grand reveal bypasses the powerful and happens in the margins to the people who were quiet and devoted enough to pay attention.
The inversion of status is relentless. From the shepherds to the doves to Simeon and Anna, the text systematically strips away every conventional marker of power and privilege.
Which sets up our final section perfectly.
Right, because how does a child raised in that obscurity with that kind of cosmic identity step into adulthood?
That's the big question.
We fast forward 12 years. The swaddled baby in the feeding trough is now a young boy on the cusp of adulthood, returning to that very same massive temple complex for the annual Passover festival.
At 12 years old, Jesus is navigating a crucial transitional mechanism in Jewish culture. He is exactly 1 year shy of becoming a son of the commandment.
Which is the milestone we know today as a bar mitzvah.
Right. At 13, a Jewish boy was recognized as a man, fully responsible for keeping the law. So at 12, he is in a preparatory phase, given more independence to participate in the religious life of the community.
So the family attends the festival, and when it wraps up, they start the long journey back north to Nazareth. But they leave without him.
Yeah, they do.
Jesus stays behind in Jerusalem, and his parents don't realize he's missing for an entire day. Now, at first glance, this sounds like terrible parenting.
I mean, losing the Messiah does sound pretty bad.
But you have to look at the logistics of ancient travel. The sources explain they were traveling in a massive caravan.
Right. Ancient travel was not a single nuclear family in a chariot. It was a massive migrating village.
Exactly. It's exactly like losing your kid at a giant sprawling family reunion, assuming he was hanging out with his cousins, only to realize a day into a 32-kilometer road trip that he's not there.
And a caravan operated with specific mechanics. The men and older boys often walked in a group at the front to set the pace and provide security. The women and smaller children walked together further back.
Because Jesus was 12, he was right on the cusp.
Yeah. Mary likely assumed he was marching up front with Joseph and the men. Joseph likely assumed he was lingering back with Mary and the younger cousins.
It makes perfect logistical sense why they wouldn't notice he was missing until the groups merged to make camp at nightfall.
But the realization must have brought absolute terror. The timeline breaks down into 3 agonizing days.
Walk us through that.
1 day traveling away from Jerusalem, 1 frantic day rushing back, and a 3rd day spent desperately scouring a sprawling, crowded metropolis for a 12-year-old boy.
They finally find him. Not wandering the streets, not lost and terrified. They find him right back in the temple complex. And he isn't just sitting quietly in a corner.
No, he is sitting directly in the center of the doctors of the law, the most highly educated, elite rabbis and scholars in Judaism.
Wow.
The text notes he is listening to them, but crucially, he is also asking them questions. His deep understanding of the scriptures is astonishing, these scholars.
That's pretty wild for a 12-year-old.
It was highly unusual for a boy of his age to be received by a group of distinguished rabbis in this capacity, let alone to leave them amazed by his intellectual and theological depth.
Mary and Joseph finally push their way into this elite circle, completely overwhelmed by parental stress. Mary basically says, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been frantically searching for you."
This raises an important question. How do earthly parents effectively manage the divine?
It's an impossible dynamic.
It really is. Jesus' response is the very first recorded statement we have from him in the Gospels. He says, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?"
Or about my father's business, right?
Yes, depending on the translation. He is gently but firmly drawing a line between his earthly guardian, Joseph, and his true heavenly father.
He is asserting his cosmic identity. He knows exactly who he is and why he's there.
Yes, and the sources note that Mary and Joseph simply do not understand what he is telling them in that moment. The profound theological weight of his statement goes completely over their heads.
I mean, how could they fully grasp it?
Right. But what is truly remarkable is the mechanism of what happens next. Despite this incredible display of divine wisdom, and despite clearly knowing his supremacy over the scholars in that room, Jesus doesn't launch his earthly ministry right then and there.
He willingly goes back down to the obscurity of Nazareth.
He submits to their earthly authority. The creator of the universe subjects himself to the discipline and instruction of a human carpenter and his wife.
That's amazing.
The text notes that he experienced a 4-fold growth from that point on. He grew in wisdom, in physical stature, and in favor before both God and men. It is a powerful testament to his complete humanity.
It is a stunning picture of restraint. He has all the answers, he astounds the greatest scholars of his day, yet he chooses to walk away from the center of religious power, return to a quiet rural village, and obey his parents for almost 2 more decades before he ever preaches a public sermon.
It is a slow, incredibly patient unfolding of history.
As we wrap up our exploration of this text, there is one recurring detail that grounds this entire sweeping narrative. Throughout all these chaotic historic events, from the crushing stress of the Roman census and the isolation of the birth, to Simeon's dark prophecy of the sword, to the sheer panic of losing her son in Jerusalem, the text emphasizes a specific internal reaction from Mary.
Yeah, it says she treasured all these things in her heart.
She served as the quiet, observant archivist of the Incarnation. And that leaves you with a profound thought to mull over as you step back into your own life this week.
I love this part.
The Gospel of Luke contains incredibly intimate, specific details. The exact phrasing of the Nunc Dimittis, the reality of the swaddling clothes, the private, frantic conversation of a mother finding her lost child. These are details that really only a mother could have known.
Yeah.
How much of this grand cosmic history, from the machinations of the Roman Empire to the prophetic warnings in the temple, was preserved for humanity simply because a quiet, observant mother refused to forget the intricate, painful, and beautiful details of her son's unusual childhood.
Without her memory, the reality of the manger and the temple scholars might have been lost to history entirely.
It's a beautiful testament to the power of simply paying attention, of holding on to the truth of your experiences, even when you don't fully understand them in the moment.
It truly is.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ancient ground today. We want to deeply thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the historical, political, and spiritual realities of Luke chapter 2.
Yeah, we hope exploring the actual mechanisms behind the text brought some fresh perspective to a story you thought you already knew.
Thank you so much for diving into this history with us. And as we close out our time together today, just remember, God blesses all the listeners. Have a wonderful week, everyone. We will see you on the next deep dive.